Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are stepping inside what is literally one of the most famous and definitely most debated psychiatric wards in all of literary history. We're going to completely deconstruct the layered, mechanical, and deeply complex world of Ken Kesey's 1962 classic One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Whether you've read the book, seen the iconic movie, or just know the name, there is this fascinating web of psychology, social critique, and highly controversial politics right beneath the surface.
Now, I want you to ask yourself something. What if the real madness isn't actually inside the patients, but in the society that locked them up? That right there is the provocative core of the text we're exploring today. Is the psychiatric ward a place of healing, or is it a factory designed to just crush anyone who doesn't fit the mold?
Okay, let's dive into this. To really wrap our heads around the depth of this text, we'll hit 6 main areas today: context of the cuckoo, the combine and conformity, madness as a social construct, gender, power, and sexism, the comic book aesthetic, and lastly, the novel versus the film.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Context of the Cuckoo, Kesey's countercultural crucible.
You know the totally bizarre, claustrophobic world of this story? It didn't just pop out of thin air. It was forged in Ken Kesey's own, quite frankly, wild reality. Back in the late 50s at Stanford, Kesey actually took a graveyard shift as an orderly at a mental health facility in Menlo Park. He'd spend his nights just talking with the patients, observing the whole institutional machine. And here is the truly mind-boggling part. During this exact same time period, he volunteered for Project MKUltra. Yeah, he was taking psychoactive drugs like LSD and mescaline in government-funded experiments. So you take these intense psychedelic experiences, combine them with his interactions on the ward, and it made him deeply sympathetic to the inmates. It completely shaped his view that, hey, maybe the people society labeled as insane were actually the ones seeing the world with total clarity.
Moving right along to Section 2, the combine and conformity, the ward as microcosm.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding this overarching concept, the combine. This is a term used by the novel's narrator, Chief Bromden, who, if you remember, is the half-Native American patient pretending to be deaf and mute. To Bromden, the hospital is really just a tiny branch of the combine. It's this massive, invisible, entirely mechanistic force of society that standardizes human behavior. Think of it like a giant machine that manipulates and processes individuals just to enforce absolute obedience. It represents an insidious, hidden discipline. The institution isn't merely following medical protocols, it's actively trying to fix or literally eliminate anyone who doesn't fit perfectly into post-war American consumer society.
And we really see the massive reach of that societal pressure the second the rebellious character Randle McMurphy arrives on the ward. He is completely shocked to find out that a lot of the men, guys like the intellectual Dale Harding or the stuttering Billy Bibbit, are actually voluntary patients. They weren't committed by the state, they committed themselves. And why? Well, because the institution is primarily there to enforce social conformity. These men are hiding in the ward because they feel like they completely failed society's really strict expectations of masculinity, sexuality, and independence. Their institutionalization is a reflection of intense social failure and anxiety, rather than just some psychological pathology.
Which brings us to Section 3, Madness as Social Construct. Who defines insanity? In the world of the novel, madness is basically treated as a disciplinary label. The text makes this incredibly powerful anti-psychiatric argument to expose it. Take Nurse Ratched. She's the cold, methodical authority of the ward, but she rarely uses overt physical violence. Instead, she normalizes obedience through just constant, unrelenting surveillance. When McMurphy shows up, loud, sexual, rebellious, traits that are often celebrated in the outside world, they're instantly rebranded as dangerous inside the ward. And the medical procedures? They are totally weaponized. Electroshock therapy is explicitly framed as coercion and punishment. Definitely not healing. Lobotomy is used as the ultimate silencing mechanism. Even Billy Bibbit is controlled through this intense infantilization and weaponized shame regarding his mother. It really forces us to stop and ask a very uncomfortable question. Who actually gets to define what is normal in your daily life?
Let's pivot a bit and look at Section 4, Gender, Power, and Sexism, the critical pushback.
Now, while the text is widely celebrated for its anti-authoritarian stance, we also have to impartially examine the severe critical pushback it's received over the decades regarding its gender politics. As the character Dale Harding bluntly puts it, we are victims of a matriarchy here, my friend. The novel presents a very distinct perspective where the oppressive, mechanical forces of modern society are actually embodied by women, most notably, of course, Nurse Ratched.
Within the framework of the text, modern society is depicted as a reflection of repressive values that literally and figuratively emasculate men. But critics have forcefully pointed out the underlying sexism in this exact structure. For instance, in a 1971 letter to the New York Times, the academic Marcia L. Falk criticized a stage adaptation of the work. She wrote, "Every woman in the background is a demonic figure, and the play is full of false yet dangerous cliches about their power over men." And that really hits the nail on the head for a lot of critics who argue the text relies on a simplistic, highly sexist dichotomy. Women in the story are pretty much either castrating, domineering monsters like Ratched and the patient's mothers, or they are mindless, subservient prostitutes. This pushback highlights how the text's vision of liberation is heavily tied to a macho male sexuality, and it's presented at the direct expense of its female characters.
All right, shifting gears again to Section 5, the comic book aesthetic, superheroes and cyborgs. So underneath all these incredibly heavy themes, Kesey actually made some very deliberate, almost playful stylistic choices. He drew heavily on popular American myths in comic books. The characters function almost like two-dimensional icons in this grand mythic battle of good versus evil. You've got Randle McMurphy as the superhero, or maybe the Lone Ranger, representing this natural vitality and hyper-masculine rebellion. Opposing him is Nurse Ratched, who acts as the cyborg villain. She's described almost like a watchful robot wielding a network of wires, totally representing mechanized societal control. And then you have Chief Bromden acting initially as the loyal sidekick, sort of the Tonto to McMurphy's Lone Ranger, absorbing his strength until he can finally break free himself. And this brilliantly illustrates Kesey's intent, using these flat, bold caricatures to juxtapose McMurphy's swaggering, cartoonish heroism directly against the cold, robotic machinery of the Combine.
And finally, our last section for today, novel versus film, a shift in perspective.
When you contrast the original text with the incredibly famous 1975 film adaptation, the absolute biggest departure is removing Chief Bromden as the primary narrator. In the novel, Bromden's schizophrenic hallucinations, the fog machines, the hidden wires, the overarching Combine, they provide this absolutely crucial psychological framework. We experience the violence of institutional power completely through his surreal, collective consciousness. But actually, by removing that internal narration, the film pivots. It completely shifts away from a deep exploration of psychological epistemology, and instead it becomes a much more straightforward, external tale. It becomes a story of empathy, injustice, and McMurphy's individual heroic rebellion against an oppressive system.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a lingering question. Does the Combine still dictate your actions today? Ken Kesey wrote this story decades ago, but the idea of an invisible, mechanized force standardizing our behavior, keeping us in line, and severely punishing nonconformity, well, that feels incredibly relevant right now. Are the choices you make truly yours, or are you just avoiding the invisible pressure of society's ward? It's definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for exploring the Cuckoo's Nest with me today, and hey, keep questioning the system.